In 2007, a guy named Tim Ferriss published a book with a title so absurd that most serious people dismissed it immediately. The 4-Hour Workweek. Business professors called it irresponsible. Career coaches called it unrealistic. HR departments probably used it as a cautionary tale. And yet, that book sold over 2 million copies. Spent 4 years on the New York Times bestseller list. And quietly rewired the ambitions of an entire generation of entrepreneurs, remote workers, and people who just couldn't shake the feeling that the 9-to-5 was designed for someone else's life. Fast forward to 2026. Remote work is mainstream. AI handles entire job functions. The gig economy employs hundreds of millions of people. Digital businesses generate life-changing income from laptops and coffee shops and spare bedrooms. Everything Ferriss described as radical in 2007 is just Tuesday now. But here's the thing most people still get wrong about this book. They think it's about working less, about being lazy with better branding, about escaping responsibility. It's not. The 4-Hour Workweek is about one very specific and very confrontational idea. Most of what you spend your time doing every day doesn't actually matter. And you know it. The meetings that could have been emails. The tasks that fill 8 hours but produce 2 hours of real output. The years spent optimizing a career you never actually chose, you just fell into it. Ferriss didn't write a book about how to be lazy. He wrote a book about how to be ruthlessly honest about where your time is actually going, and what it's actually worth. And in 2026, with AI, automation, and remote work changing every rule about how and where work happens, these 9 lessons don't just still apply. They apply more than ever. Let's get into it. Lesson 1. Retirement is the worst goal you can have. Lesson 1. And this one sets the tone for everything that follows. Ferriss opens the book with an attack on the most universally accepted financial goal in existence. Retirement. The plan most people are living. Work hard for 40 years. Save aggressively. Deny yourself things now so you can enjoy them later. And then, finally, at 65, you get to live. Ferriss calls this plan the worst-case scenario masquerading as a goal. And here's why. First, it's based on deferred living. You're betting your best years on a future that isn't guaranteed. Your health at 65 will not be your health at 35. Your energy at 70 will not be what it is right now. The hiking trip you're saving retirement for might not be physically possible when you finally get there. Second, most people who retire discover something devastating within the first year. They're bored. Not relaxed. Not fulfilled. Bored. Because human beings are not built for permanent leisure. We're built for challenge. For contribution. For the feeling that what we do matters. But here's the problem with that plan in 2026 specifically. Most people in their 20s and 30s today will never have a traditional pension. Social security is uncertain at best. The idea of retiring at 65 with a comfortable cushion is increasingly a fantasy, not a plan. Most people don't realize this, but Ferriss isn't telling you not to think about the future. He's telling you not to defer your entire life to it. This is where it gets interesting. His alternative isn't spend everything now. It's what he calls mini retirements, distributed throughout your working life. A month in Lisbon. A season learning to surf. A year working 4 hours a day because your business allows it. Not someday. Now. While your body is young and your curiosity is alive. The goal isn't retirement. The goal is designing a life you don't need to retire from. Lesson 2. The 80-20 rule will change how you see every hour of your day. Lesson 2. And this might be the single most practically useful idea in the entire book. Ferriss borrows from an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto, who noticed in the 1800s that 80% of Italy's land was owned by 20% of the population. That ratio, 80% of results coming from 20% of causes, turned out to apply almost everywhere. 80% of your income likely comes from 20% of your clients. 80% of your stress likely comes from 20% of your relationships. 80% of your productive output at work comes from 20% of your actual working hours. But here's the thing most people never do with that information. They acknowledge it. They find it interesting. They maybe even share it at dinner. And then they continue spending the same amount of time on the 80% that produces almost nothing. This is where it gets real in 2026. The average knowledge worker today operates in an environment of infinite busyness. Slack messages, email chains, meetings, status updates, syncs, check-ins. Most of it feels productive. Almost none of it is. Ferriss's challenge is brutal and specific. Identify the 20% of your activities that produce 80% of your results. Then ask yourself, what would happen if I eliminated everything else? Most people don't realize this, but the answer to that question is almost always, not much. The emails would handle themselves. The meetings would stop happening. The people who needed to reach you would find another way. But here's the problem that keeps most people stuck. Busyness has become a status symbol. Being overwhelmed signals importance. If you're not slammed, are you even working hard enough? Ferriss says that's a trap. A very expensive, very exhausting trap. The most valuable thing you can do in 2026, when AI can handle your busy work, is to get ruthlessly clear on what only you can do that actually moves the needle. And do only that. Lesson 3: Elimination before automation before delegation. Lesson 3. And this is the one that separates people who genuinely transform their productivity from people who just buy more productivity apps. Ferriss gives you a specific sequence. And the sequence matters. Step 1: Eliminate. Before you automate anything, before you delegate anything, ask the most uncomfortable question first. Does this need to be done at all? Not, how do I do this faster? Not, who can do this for me? Does this need to exist? Because automating or delegating a task that shouldn't exist in the first place is just a more efficient way of wasting everyone's time. But here's the problem. Most people skip straight to delegation or automation because elimination requires something those two don't: the courage to stop doing something that looks productive. It requires saying, this meeting, this report, this process, it doesn't actually produce anything valuable. And I'm going to stop. Most people don't realize this. But the most radical act of productivity isn't doing more things faster. It's doing fewer things that actually matter. Step 2: Automate. Once you've eliminated everything you can, look at what remains and ask, can this be done by a system? A tool? An AI? A process that runs without a human touch every time? In 2026, the answer to that question for a staggering number of tasks is yes. AI tools can write first drafts, answer routine emails, manage scheduling, generate reports, and handle customer inquiries with a level of quality that would have required a full-time employee 5 years ago. Step 3: Delegate. Only after elimination and automation, whatever is left, that genuinely requires human judgment and can't be automated, now you ask who else can handle it. This is where it gets interesting. Ferriss wrote about outsourcing and virtual assistants back in 2007 when the concept was still exotic and slightly embarrassing to admit to. In 2026, an entire industry exists to do exactly this, at prices and quality levels that would have been unimaginable when the book was written. The sequence is everything. Eliminate. automate, delegate. In that order. Every time. Lesson 4. Fear setting is more important than goal setting. Lesson 4. And this is the one that personally hit me hardest when I first read this book. Everyone talks about goal setting, vision boards, SMART goals, 5-year plans. The whole industry of personal development is essentially built on the idea that if you get clear enough on what you want, you'll go get it. Ferriss says that's missing something crucial. Because most people don't fail to act because they don't know what they want. They fail to act because they're afraid of what might happen if they try. And that fear, almost always, lives in the shadows. Unnamed. Unexamined. Quietly doing its work. So Ferriss introduces an exercise he calls fear setting. Here's how it works. Take the thing you're afraid to do. Quit the job, start the business, move to the city, launch the product, and write down every single thing that could go wrong. Not vaguely. Specifically. In detail. Then, for each item on that list, ask 3 questions. 1. How likely is this actually? On a scale of 1 to 10? 2. If this happened, what could I do to fix it? What would recovery look like? 3. If I do nothing, if I stay exactly where I am, what does my life look like in 1 year? 3 years? 10? Most people don't realize this, but fear only has power in the dark. The moment you drag it into the light, name it, examine it, stress test it, it almost always turns out to be smaller than it felt. This is where it gets genuinely powerful in 2026. The risks of not acting have never been higher. AI is automating job functions across every industry. The skills that felt secure 5 years ago are increasingly commoditized. The risk of trying something new feels enormous. The risk of not trying feels distant and abstract. But Ferriss's fear-setting exercise makes the cost of inaction impossible to ignore. Because when you write down what your life looks like in 10 years if you never take the risk, that answer is usually scarier than anything on the "what could go wrong" list. Lesson 5. The new rich don't ask for permission, they ask for forgiveness. Lesson 5. And this one is less a productivity hack and more a complete philosophy shift. Ferriss uses the term, the new rich, throughout the book. And he defines it deliberately. The new rich are not people with the most money. They're people with the most options. The most control over their time, location, and attention. And one of the defining characteristics of the new rich, the thing that separates them from people with the same skills who stay stuck, is this. They stop waiting for permission. They don't wait to be promoted into more responsibility. They take it. They don't ask if they can work remotely. They work remotely and let the results speak. They don't wait for the perfect moment to start. They start, badly, messily, imperfectly, and adjust. But here's the problem with how most people are conditioned. We've been trained since kindergarten to wait for permission. Raise your hand. Wait to be called on. Don't speak until spoken to. Follow the process. Respect the hierarchy. And that conditioning is genuinely useful in some contexts. It keeps organizations from descending into chaos. Most people don't realize this, but in the context of building your own life, that conditioning is a cage. A very polite, very well-intentioned cage, but a cage. This is where it gets especially relevant in 2026. The traditional gatekeepers have never been weaker. You don't need a record label to release music. You don't need a publisher to write a book. You don't need a network executive to build an audience. You don't need a bank's permission to start a business. The tools for creating, distributing, and monetizing almost anything you can imagine are available to almost anyone for almost nothing. The only permission you need is your own. Ferriss says stop asking, "Is this allowed?" Start asking, what would happen if I just did it? The answer, more often than you'd expect, is something good. Lesson 6. Relative income matters more than absolute income. Lesson 6. And this one will make you rethink every salary comparison you've ever made. Most people think about income in absolute terms. $80,000 a year. $120,000 a year. $200,000 a year. And those numbers feel real. Concrete. Comparable. But Ferriss introduces a concept that completely reframes what income actually means. He calls it relative income, and it changes everything. Here's the idea. Two people both earn $100,000 a year. Person A works 80 hours a week to earn it. They're effectively making $24 an hour. They have no time. They're perpetually exhausted. They live for the 2 weeks of vacation they get per year, if they can actually disconnect. Person B works 20 hours a week to earn it. Same $100,000. They're effectively making $96 an hour. They have afternoons free. They travel when they want. They're present for their family. They have creative energy left over at the end of the day. Same salary. Completely different lives. Most people don't realize this, but absolute income is almost meaningless without knowing what you traded for it. But here's the problem with how most people evaluate their careers. They compare salaries. Not hourly rates. Not quality of life. Not time freedom. Just the number. And they accept an $80,000 salary with 60-hour weeks as better than a $60,000 income built around a 25-hour week. Because the number is bigger. This is where it gets practical in 2026. The rise of remote work, freelancing, and AI-assisted businesses has made it genuinely possible to earn strong relative incomes at working hours that would have seemed fantastical in 2007. Ferriss was describing a future that's now present tense. The question isn't, how do I earn more? It's, how do I earn more per hour of my life? Because your hours are the one currency you can never replenish. Lesson 7. Create a muse, an automated income source that funds your life. Lesson 7. And this is where the book gets most practical and most misunderstood. Ferriss introduces the concept of the muse, a cash-flowing automated business designed specifically to fund your ideal lifestyle. Not to make you a billionaire. Not to be your life's work. Just to generate enough reliable income, passively enough, that your time becomes yours. And in 2026, the playbook for building one has never been more accessible. Here's the core idea. Most businesses are built around passion or opportunity without a clear income architecture. They require constant presence. They scale linearly. More customers means more work. A muse is designed differently from the beginning. It solves a specific problem for a specific niche. It delivers value through a system, not through you personally. It generates income while you sleep. And it's deliberately small enough to run without a team of 50 people. But here's the problem most people hit when they try this. They think too big. They want to build the next Amazon. They want to go viral. They want 1 million customers. Most people don't realize this. But a business that generates $5,000 a month with 10 hours of maintenance? That's life-changing for most people. That's rent, travel, and freedom. That's the ability to leave the job you hate. That's a different life. This is where it gets interesting in 2026. The muse concept has never been more buildable. AI tools can create the content. Print on demand handles the inventory. Automated email sequences handle the sales. Payment platforms handle the transactions. Course platforms handle the delivery. The infrastructure for an automated income stream that Ferriss spent an entire chapter explaining how to build manually can now be assembled in a weekend with tools that cost less than a Netflix subscription. The muse isn't a fantasy. It's a project. The only question is whether you're willing to start building. Lesson 8. Information is not the problem, action is. Lesson 8. And this one is the most uncomfortable truth in a book full of uncomfortable truths. Ferriss noticed something troubling about the people who read self-improvement books, attend seminars, watch YouTube videos about productivity and success, but never actually change anything. He called it information obesity. The condition of consuming so much information about how to improve your life that the consumption itself becomes a substitute for actually improving it. Sound familiar? Here's the brutal truth. You probably already know enough to take the next step toward whatever it is you actually want. You don't need one more book about entrepreneurship before you start. You don't need 3 more YouTube videos about productivity before you restructure your schedule. We now live in the most information-rich environment in human history. Every question has 17 YouTube answers. Every skill has a free course. Every strategy has a podcast episode. The bottleneck has never been information. It has always been, and in 2026, it is more than ever, the willingness to close the browser, put down the book, and do the one uncomfortable thing that actually moves you forward. Ferriss puts it simply, a person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations they're willing to have. Start having them. Lesson 9. The opposite of happiness is not sadness, it's boredom. Lesson 9. The last one. And the most quietly profound idea in the entire book. Ferriss makes an observation that most people never expect to find in a book about productivity and time management. He says, and this is the thing that stayed with me longest, that the opposite of happiness is not sadness. It's boredom. And the antidote to boredom, the thing that actually produces the feeling of being alive, is not comfort. It's not security. It's not a bigger house or a better title or a longer vacation. It's excitement. Novelty. The feeling that what you're doing right now matters and is growing and is going somewhere. But here's the problem with how modern life is designed. Almost everything in our environment is optimized to reduce friction and eliminate discomfort. One-click delivery. Entertainment on demand. Algorithms that predict your next preference before you finish your current one. Comfort, in 2026, has never been more available or more immediately accessible. And most people don't realize this, but chronic comfort is its own kind of suffering. When nothing challenges you, nothing excites you. When every outcome is predictable, nothing feels meaningful. When the hardest decision of your week is what to watch on Netflix, something starts to quietly hollow out inside. This is where it gets deeply personal for almost everyone watching. The people most likely to feel this aren't the ones who are struggling. They're the ones who are comfortable, who have everything fine, and can't explain why fine doesn't feel like enough. Ferriss's answer isn't to blow up your comfortable life. It's to deliberately engineer challenge, novelty, and growth back into it. To pursue the uncomfortable project. To travel somewhere genuinely foreign. To learn the skill that scares you. To have the conversation you've been avoiding. Not because those things are easy. Because they're the opposite of boredom. And being genuinely alive, engaged, challenged, growing, is worth 1,000 comfortable tomorrows. In 2026, with more tools, more freedom, and more optionality than any generation in history, there is absolutely no excuse to be bored with your own life. Build something. Go somewhere. Learn something that scares you. That's what this book has always really been about. 9 lessons. Written in 2007. More relevant today than when they were published. Let's run through them one final time. Retirement is the wrong goal. Design a life you don't need to escape from. The 80-20 rule means most of what you're doing today doesn't matter. Find the 20% that does. Eliminate before you automate, before you delegate. In that order, always. Fear setting beats goal setting. Drag your fears into the light and watch them shrink. Stop waiting for permission. The gatekeepers have never been weaker. Relative income beats absolute income. Your hours are worth more than your paycheck suggests. Build a muse, an automated income source that funds your freedom. Stop consuming information as a substitute for action. You already know enough. And remember, boredom is the real enemy. Excitement is the point. Here's what I want you to sit with. Ferriss wrote this book in 2007 with one central provocation. What if the life you've been told to want isn't actually the life you want? That question hit differently in 2007, when remote work was a fringe experiment, when building an online business was considered eccentric, when the idea of working from anywhere was the kind of thing only a handful of people in the world were actually doing. In 2026, every single constraint that made those ideas radical has either collapsed or is in the process of collapsing. The tools exist. The infrastructure exists. The proof of concept exists in millions of people who've already built it. The only thing that hasn't caught up, for most people, is the belief that it's actually possible for them. That belief is the last obstacle. And it's the only one that matters. Because here's the truth underneath all 9 of these lessons. The 4-hour workweek was never really about 4 hours. It was about one question that Ferriss asks near the end of the book, quietly, almost in passing, that I think is the most important question in the whole thing. What would you do if you could not fail? Not what would you try? Not what would you consider? What would you do? Whatever your answer is, that's the direction. Now you have fewer excuses than any human being in history to not go there. What are you waiting for? Which of these 9 lessons landed hardest for you, and why? Drop it in the comments. And if you've already read the 4-hour workweek, tell me the one idea that actually changed something in your real life. Not just your thinking. Your life. If you want more breakdowns like this every day, books that give you ideas you can actually use on a Monday morning, subscribe and hit the bell. Full breakdowns of several books referenced in this video are linked in the description below. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.